Good chilly afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Heartland Farm, the third episode of our little show, The Toy and the Real McCoy. So thank you for joining us. Once again, we ask you to share it with your friends. Those of you that have heard me talk at tractor pulls and do announcing or our previous episodes of The Toy and the Real McCoy often hear me mention the horsepower wars. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today. We're going to cover a lot of ground. We may go a little longer than the 10 minutes we've been running. So I apologize for that and ask that you indulge us. There's a lot of info. There's this little book that kind of started the whole thing. It's a book called The Toy and the Real McCoy. We sell it at the dealership. They published them, I don't know, it's probably been 20 years ago, whatnot. And it has a toy John Deere tractor and then the story of the real McCoy. So that's where this whole idea came from. And just wanted to point that out and take all the credit because that's really where the idea came from. But as we talk about the horsepower wars, it's important to realize how the tractor replaced the horse. And starting in the 1900s, early 1900s, the tractor and the steam traction engine went on to become the gasoline or multi-fuel traction engine became replacing the horse. And by 1920, there was a lot of companies making tractors using purchased components. Blacksmith shop gears, engines that were meant for automobiles or gosh knows what. And so there was nearly 200 tractor manufacturers by the year 1920, which seems hard to fathom today when really all the tractor manufacturers in the world take up two hands, and that's it now. But there was a lot of bogus claims, and the state legislature in the state of Nebraska really took a frown upon the fact that there was all these traveling salesmen coming into town with a picture of a tractor and selling it to the farmers that were unsuspecting, making a lot of bogus claims about horsepower and how much work it could do in a day. And so the state legislature of the state of Nebraska said, you're not going to be us, our farmers anymore. And so they took their land grant college, the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, and they established a tractor testing laboratory in 1920. The laboratory exists to this day. It is the only truly accredited tractor testing laboratory in the world, and its results are respected throughout the world. And still to this day, if you're going to sell a tractor in the state of Nebraska, it's going to have been tested at the University of Nebraska Tractor Lab, named after Lester Larson, longtime director of the Tractor Lab, a real trendsetter in the agricultural equipment business. This book was authored by a man who's passed away now, C.H. Wendell. This is the Bible of the Nebraska tractor test. This has pictures and very detailed accounts of all the tractor tests of the tractors that have been tested from 1920 until this book was published in the 80s. And there are newer books, soft cover, that are available. This one I have 2 copies of. If you're lucky enough to have one, hang on to it. Don't ever let it come to any harm. They don't print them anymore. Mr. Wendell's passed. And Almond Auctions just got done auctioning off the last of Mr. Wendell's literature collection and the last of his hardcover books. And there was no more than Nebraska books left, or I'd have bought all of them I could get. This is a tremendous book. They are available on eBay. Be ready to dig deep because they cost some money. But that's when I mentioned Nebraska tractor test, that's what we're talking about right there. So as we talk about the horsepower wars, I'm talking about from 1960 moving forward, and especially around 1970 when it really got intense. John Deere had been making 2-cylinder tractors and were being laughed at up until 1960 by all the other companies. Oliver had been selling 6-cylinder tractors for over 20 years at that point. International Harvester had been selling 6-cylinder tractors for 6 or 8 years at that point. And there was John Deere still making the Johnny Pop 2-cylinder tractors all the way up till 1960. But there's big changes on the horizon. John Deere invited every dealer in the United States and Canada to fly to Dallas in August of 1960 for a world-acclaimed event called John Deere Day. It was held at a big coliseum out there. You couldn't get a commercial flight anywhere around because all flights had been chartered by John Deere, and they flew dealers and their wives or their managers down there to see the unveiling of the new generation of power, which was John Deere's 4- and 6-cylinder tractors. And it was just at the nick of time because the horsepower wars were in full swing at that point. John Deere had overtaken the International Harvester Company as the worldwide leader in agricultural equipment sales in 1958, still pedaling 2-cylinder tractors, but the sunset was coming. John Deere took the tooling for the 2-cylinder tractor, sent it to a plant in Argentina, where they built 2-cylinder tractors until 1968, maybe even a little more. Jim McFadden will pop right in there and tell me, I'm sure, in just a minute. So in 1963, John Deere had been selling the 6-cylinder tractors, the 4010s, for 2 years at that point, I'm sorry. And the war was on, and they decided that they had to make a bigger tractor. So that's when the John Deere 5010, the king of the prairie land, came out with a big 531 cubic inch engine that eclipsed the 4010 and allowed farmers in the wheat belt country to use much larger tillage equipment. And that tractor sufficed for a while. It was a big naturally aspirated 531 cubic inch engine. But the war was on, and the closer we got to 1970, the bigger the expanses of the wheat farms were, and dairy farms were growing, all crop farms were. This country was growing in population. The world was hungry, and our farmers was going to feed them. And the only way to do that was to work more land, work more hours, work land that wasn't previously premium land. It was wet and like that, so that's where the bigger tractors came in. So when we get into the early 1970s, the war was in full bloom, and the biggest tractors available at that time was the Oliver 2255, which I'm going to show you a toy of right here. This originally was introduced in 1972 with a Caterpillar 3150 V8, which was quickly replaced in 1974 by the Caterpillar 3208, 636 cubic inches of V8 power. That tractor produced 147 horsepower in its test at Nebraska at the power takeoff. Also in contention, and I'm sorry I failed you on this one, was the Massey Ferguson 1155. This is an 1150. We have to use it as a representative of the big power Massey. The 1155 had a 640 cubic inch Perkins diesel that provided 140 horsepower at the power takeoff, and that was Massey's big unit, but it once again was a V8. On the Minneapolis Moline line, here's a toy out of my collection over at the house. This is a G1355, which featured a Minneapolis Moline 585 6-cylinder diesel in the front and an Oliver rear end and an Oliver 3-speed over-under hydraulic shift in the back. And that tractor made 142 horsepower. John Deere had, in their Generation 2 Sound Idea tractors, this 4630, which made 150 horsepower. And International was quick to answer it with the 1566. They twisted the tail on the 436 cubic inch DT series engine and made this tractor make 161 horsepower at its Nebraska tractor test on the power takeoff. Beautiful tractor. The 1566 was a real beast. Had a 3-speed transmission, high and low range, and then the 2-speed torque amplifier. John Deere wanted to answer this call. They still had that beautiful 531 cubic inch engine, and so they made the 6030. They introduced this tractor in 1971 with the big 531 and an inline pump on it. They made 45 of these naturally aspirated, but they just didn't make enough horsepower for the horsepower war. So the orders for those were pretty slim in 1972, and in 73, the naturally aspirated version was no longer offered. It was turbocharged, it was intercooled, and it made a whopping 175 horsepower at the PTO, tested even better than that in Nebraska. And the word from the dealers that sold these new said there was never one that came off the train that didn't make 200 horsepower. A lot of them make 225 and more, and today, guys have they found favor with tractor pullers, and it's untold how much horsepower they make. But the 6030 is kind of the feature that we want to talk about today. We're going to take a walk over in one of the other barns and look at the real one, but I'm going to share a couple 6030 stories. First of all, here in Washington County, New York, where we milk about 35,000 cows a day, there only was one 6030 that was ever bought new and used here in Washington County, and that was from a dairy farmer over in Hebron, Ray Campbell. Ray's no longer with us. He had a 1566 that he decided he was going to answer his need for horsepower, but when that big displacement John Deere came out with that turbocharger on it, he knew that 15 days were numbered, and in 1975 he traded that 15 in for a 6030. Kept the 6030, loved it. His had 24.532 rubber, which is kind of what's replicated on this toy. The one we're going to look at has 20.838. It's a little taller and narrower rubber. But anyway, Ray loved that 6030, as did his family. But in 1982, he decided that he wanted the comfort of a John Deere Sound Guard body, the cab that's shown here on this 4630, and also a power shift transmission. So it was traded in for a John Deere 4840. Now today, we have a lot of 6030s that live in Washington County. Some of them are real 60/30s, some of them are 50/20s that have been renumbered. But the fact of the matter is, the tractor pullers love them. We do have some genuine 60/30s here in the county for sure. And I guess I just want to give you that up to speed on that. Let's take a walk over in barn 5 here, and we'll take a look at our real 60/30. Here's our 60/30. We bought this year. Bought it for my wife for her birthday. Sometimes you have to do things like that to be able to sneak another one in the barn. It's 531 cubic inch turbocharged intercooled tractor. This is a 1976 model fitted with the John Deere cab of its day. This is the last of the round hood John Deeres. John Deere had gone to this generation 2 tractors, the square hood, the 40/30, 42, 44, 46/30 tractors, but there was just no way that they could get that big 531 under that square hood. So that's why they continued this style right here from 1972 till 1977 when the last one was made. There was 4,028 60/30s made, 45 of them naturally aspirated, and the rest were turbocharged and intercooled. They're a legendary tractor. They were the king of the wheatland, and today they're highly sought after. If you can find a naturally aspirated one, they are without question one of the most collectible of the round hood John Deeres that you'll ever find. I hope you enjoyed our little play today on the toy and the real McCoy. This tractor is a 8-speed synchro range transmission. It's got a wicked heavy rear end in it, 3-point hitch, 1,000 shaft PTO. Beautiful, Dave. She's been nicely restored. It's a long axle tractor. We could put duals on it, but I doubt we're going to be doing that. We hope you enjoyed our show today. Please share this with your friends that might have classic tractor fever like we do, and you can be sure that next week we're going to come back to you with some information on the Minneapolis Moline G1000 Wheatland with front wheel assist. I do want to point out that here at Heartland Farm we really are fond of front wheel assist tractors, and we have less than a handful of 2-wheel drives, but because of the significance of a 60/30, we really think it's a real treat to have one, and we absolutely love this tractor, and we love sharing our collection with you. So if you ever want to come here and see them in person, Sunday's a good day. Just get a hold of me. We love to have people come and talk tractors with us. We're guilty of infecting a lot of people with the classic tractor virus here. 2 years ago at our summer picnic, an innocent enough conversation caused a dear friend of ours to go from a 1-tractor operation to 7, and he's not done collecting yet. So I'm sorry for those of you who have contaminated. A mask won't help it. The only thing that cures classic tractor fever is the next one. Thanks a lot. Share this if you would. Have a great day. And one last thing. I want to dedicate today's broadcast to a dear friend of ours who's under the weather. Fred Wolf, we're all thinking of you. We're praying for you. You've got a health challenge that's going on right now. And I'm sure with the prayers of all your friends, you're going to come through this with shining, flying colors. So we're wishing you all the best, hoping you're watching this from where you are right now. And we can't wait to see you back out on the tractor pull track. Thanks.